Hello, my name is Mike. This is a rusty grenade. Bet you thought I was going to say this is a bike, huh? No, it's because it's not. It's a car. If you've been following my channel, you watched me take the old 6-cylinder out, take the old subframe out, put a new subframe in it, and put a 351 truck engine in this car. And I said kind of the last thing I had to deal with was the exhaust, because, well, I couldn't just use an off-the-shelf exhaust system because, well, this isn't a Mustang, it isn't a Ford truck, it needs a custom exhaust. So in this episode, I'm going to drive this thing all the way to the muffler shop, take it on its virgin voyage. No, I'm not going to drive it without an exhaust. I don't want the neighbors suing me for noise pollution. And I actually took it to the gas station the other day and only shattered 13 windows along the way getting gas in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it on the trailer. And we're going to take it to the muffler shop, the exhaust shop. And he's going to put together a nice custom exhaust system for me. So then I can actually drive the thing, you know. I'm also going to put a different instrument cluster in it. I purchased a gauges cluster from a Mustang or a Capri, and it's got all the gauges. It's got charging system, oil temperature, water pressure, something like that, and a tachometer. And it'll fit right in that dash. I also have the trim panel coming for it, and I just have to, play with a bunch of wires, and we'll make that work. So stick around.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona, not far from historic Route 66, is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least 2 cool wheels.
Tony, and he's going to be putting together an exhaust for us. And I'll show him the situation here, and we'll get it going.
Keep the 2 1/4 size here.
Yeah, if that's 2 1/4.
Yeah, it looks like 2 1/4.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we'll run 2 1/4 out underneath, come together here. Then you'll have your 3-bolt flange.
Perfect.
3-inch pipe. Probably going to be resting against this, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned. If I need to make a little heat shield, I can, but it's just cable. It's not going to hurt it.
You have to worry about. A lot of times from the factory, they're touching it anyway.
Sure.
And then the 3-inch will come here. We'll go into a muffler up over the axle. Do you want the tailpipe hidden? Do you want it kind of coming out the side?
Just out the rear bumper. Yeah, so just straight back.
Okay.
Yeah, straight back. Maybe if you've got a nice little chrome tip, that would be nice, but really not necessary.
It's up to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the car will remain a sleeper. It'll look pretty cosmetically stock. That's
okay. And you want like a MagnaFlow muffler, something.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Something that'll. I'm more concerned about appearance than sound, so I don't necessarily want something loud. Just as long as it breathes easily.
You're going to be running 3-inch pipe on it. It's going to be loud.
Yeah.
It's just going to be loud.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, as long as you're good with that. I mean, the MagnaFlow muffler is probably your best bet as far as the quieter sound.
All right, I just got a call. The Rusty Grenade is ready. I'm bringing some cash to Tony. It's actually going to cost me more for the exhaust system than I paid for the car and the engine combined. Of course, there was a lot of other parts, but it's, it is what it is. Wow, it looks really good. Look at that. And into a 3-inch, so even though I can't run dual like I originally wanted to, it's going to breathe just fine, huh?
It'll actually perform better for you.
You think so? Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. You did a great job on the curves.
Kind of had to do it that way.
Yeah, you were saying. Fantastic. Oh, a nice chrome tip. Look at that. That's pretty.
It's a stainless steel.
Yeah, it looks good though. Okay. Awesome. Sounds really good. Just throttle a little here. Alrighty. So another thing I need to address, and you guys probably spotted it, I kept having to rev it up to clear the throttle because it's just loading up with gas. And I pulled the air cleaner off a little while ago, and there was gas everywhere. And what's happening is this is a electric fuel pump, and it's pushing, I don't know, I think the spec on it was like 10 psi, which is too much for this system. We need to get it down to about half that. So what we're going to do, I keep saying we. Why do I keep saying we? I must have a clone nearby or something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a fuel pressure regulator in the hose here to kind of reduce that pressure. What's happening is the pressure is so great, it's bypassing the float valve, the needle and seat, and it's putting too much gas in the system. So I went and had the same problem with the Yard Art Cougar, so I went and stole the pressure regulator off the Yard Art Cougar. And the reason that I stole the pressure regulator off the Yard Art Cougar is, number one, I'm not really driving it anyway. And number two, if I went to the local auto parts store to buy one of these, it'd be about $60. So, being a cheapskate, I went on eBay, and the cheapest one they had there was about $25. So it's ordered, it's on its way, and when it arrives, it'll go back on the Yard Art Cougar. But I stole this one off the Yard Art Cougar so I could drive the car today. You know, I'm just trying to save some time here. And we'll get that installed, and hopefully it'll reduce the pressure to the point where the car will
will run a little bit more lean, run a little bit better. Well, it sounds much, much better. That is, if you can hear it over that stupid belt noise. God, that's annoying. That's a brand new belt. Shh. Quiet. Hush. Quiet. Shh. Shh. Hush. Thank you. I said hush. Quiet, quiet, quiet. Like this soapy water. It'll come back. It's always something. And then the next project is this. Okay, I've got a gauges cluster. This will fit in the dash. It'll take a little bit of modification as far as the shift indicator goes, since this does not have one. I'll just eliminate it. I mean, you can count clicks, you know, park, reverse, neutral, drive, low, pretty simple stuff, so I don't really need it. On the back of it is a printed circuit, and there are two connectors. Let me turn this around. There are two connectors. There's one here, and there's one here. Now, the existing cluster only has one because it doesn't have as many inputs. So I've got additional plugs, courtesy of the local, you know, self-service wrecking yard, so that we can connect it. So we're going to add a couple of wires. We've already got wires run for the oil pressure and the water temperature. And there's another wire that somebody else ran for an alarm system, and that will be our tack wire. So shouldn't be too hard to make this work. I've got both schematics, so I know which terminal is going to do what. And, you know, if we need to, I want to try and use the one that's already in the car. We can, you know, move these terminals around. The red thingy pops out, and then you can actually slide these wires out of the plugs and put them in the correct location. So we'll see how that pans out. Now, something I want to try. I don't particularly like the amp gauge, not because it's bad or anything, but I think a volt gauge actually gives me more usable information. And when I go to install this, I've got to run two wires to that amp gauge. One on the battery side, one on the alternator side. So what I'm going to try to do This is one of those El Cheapo gauges. I'm going to try to put this in place of the amp gauge. Then I'll have a volt gauge. And there's already voltage and ground going to the cluster, feeding the cluster, so I won't have to run any additional new wires. So we'll see how that pans out. Okay, those are about the same height. I just gonna have to drill some different holes. That should mount in there. I'm gonna pull the printed circuit out of the way so I can drill some different holes. I'm also gonna need to drill a couple of smaller holes for the wire terminals. And then once it's all said and done, once I make sure that it can actually work and fit, well, then I can cut this out. And there's no going back once I do that. So, got to make sure it works before I eliminate part of the original printed circuit. Now let's see if it clears the bezel properly and is centered properly. Oh, dang, dude. Check that out. That turned out awesome. It looks damn near factory. Alright. I like it. Alrighty, so terminated the gauge, and I've tied in here where I have a ground coming in, and then this is the 12 volt ignition going to the IVR. That's this little box down here. On Ford vehicles, they have something called an IVR, which is an instrument voltage regulator. Basically, it takes 12 volts and reduces it down to like 9 volts for the gauges. That way, if there's any fluctuations in the voltage as the engine is started or as the charging system puts out, it will compensate and keep it at a nice steady 8 volts or 9 volts, whatever it is that the gauges need to see. My gauge doesn't need that. It needs the full 12. So we're kind of connected here to the full 12. And on the other side, looky there. Looks like it was made for it. I'm going to go ahead and check it before I put it in the car. I'll connect it to that battery back there just to make sure, but should be good to go. Another thing I'm going to need to do, as you can see, these little contact strips, well, they're not where they're supposed to be. And what happens is they come loose from the plastic, and you go to plug your connector in and it moves them around and they connect to each other, or they don't make a connection. So just a little tiny drop of super glue on the underside. Hold still now. It's not working with me. If you pull the little conductor strip up, you can put a drop of super glue on the underside of it and then glue it back down in place, so that way when the connector's plugged in, it won't push it out of place. Alright, we're going to go ahead and pull that cluster out. And like I said, the shift indicator, well, that's controlled by this little cable here, and it's broken. I've tried to hold it with some like tape. So this thing just kind of slides around and doesn't stay adjusted anyway. So that's going away. And, you know, maybe I'll just paint some stuff on the dash for where this lever is. So the printed circuit on this is of course going to be totally different. It doesn't have the gauges, and even though the connector is the same, it's going to be wired different.
So I got to map this out, see where each one of these terminals goes, and then I can compare it to the new one going in and move these around as necessary and add another plug so that we can go to the correct locations on the new cluster. If I get stuck, well, I have a little help from the old service manuals. So we'll get that figured out. So here are my 3 new wires. One is for the tach, one is for the oil pressure gauge, the other is for the temperature gauge. And then I have the original harness. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my connector here, my spare connector. I'm going to take all the terminals out of it. And then one by one, I'm going to remove them from this one and place them into this one based upon the location in the new cluster, which would also include, of course, these 3 new wires. So that's the plan. Not sure how well it's going to work out, but it's certainly worth a try. I do have the help of, schematics. Alright guys, here's where we're at. This turned out to be a little bit more complicated than anticipated, and that's because the original dash in this car had 2 features or 2 indicators that the instrument cluster, Mustang cluster, does not have. One of them is for the charging system, and the other is for the tailgate ajar. So I made my own. There are fortunately 2 unused light sockets on this cluster, and on the telltale, on the trim piece, one of them is for check engine light, and the other one is for a turbo. So my charging system, when I first go to start the car, just like most cars, instead of a battery light, I'm going to have a check engine light, and it's going to be this guy. And then when my tailgate is ajar, it's going to say that my turbo is on. But that's okay. At least I know what they are. I can put them to use. In order for me to rig it up, because the wires going to my alternator were a little heavier wire, I found a connector I could use. It has to be used in conjunction, in parallel with this 500 ohm resistor. This is how the original car was wired, so I duplicated that. And fortunately, there just happened to be 2 mounting holes here already built into the plastic. So I just, connected stuff. Thank goodness for schematics. And then this wire here is also going to be on a separate plug. This is for that tailgate ajar indicator that I was talking about. Okay, the terminals that are used here, not all of them are used, but those that are used are terminated properly. And all these are terminated properly. Okay, so here we have the main plug here, the secondary plug. One of the tabs broke, so I used a screw to hold the wire in so it won't fall out. And then we have the large one for the charging system, and then this little white and purple one that's for our trunk ajar. So now the trick's going to be getting all those connectors plugged in while I'm inserting this cluster. And I still have to replace the sending units. I have to change the temperature sending unit and the oil pressure sending unit because they were calibrated for that aftermarket gauge. So we'll change those out too, and just see if we can burn the car to the ground with an electrical fire. Yeah, so I gotta get back in here and connect this little purple and white guy, this guy here, and our connector here. It's kind of a struggle. Okay, so this is in place. Everything's plugged in except the speedometer. Turns out the cable has a different size connector on the back. It's always something. But that's okay. I run without a speedometer for the time being. At least I have a tack. Alright, we'll get the screws back in it and we'll change the sending units and we'll power this thing up and see if anything works. Shush! Damn, that thing's annoying. Alrighty, this should do it. Okay, charge system, seat belts. Got a tachometer, voltage, 14 volts. It's close, the temperature is still, I've got oil pressure and I got fuel. And you can see the fuel gauge kind of creeping up a little. All I need now is a, speedometer cable. It's always something. Oh, I'm going to check out the dash lights. Let me turn this phone light off. Oh yeah, it's got a red tint. Even my little volt light. See it getting brighter, dimmer. Oh yeah. This is cool. I'm pretty happy with this. Oh look! My oil pressure is actually normal. You don't suppose that cheap Chinese gauge is lying to me, do ya? Yeah, so this is the correct sending unit for this type of gauge, and I'm trusting Ford before I'm trusting China. That's gonna do it for this episode. We got the Rusty Grenade running with its new engine and drivetrain, new old used junkyard engine. And she runs great. We know how hot she is, we know how much oil pressure we've got, all those good things. And that concludes this episode. I know this is the part of the episode you guys all look forward to the most, the end. But to really set it off right, we're going to see if the Rusty Grenade can actually do a burnout. That'll make this ending even better. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all those things. And we'll see you in the next episode.
just blew my tranny.